Welcome to HR Voices, a podcast for independent HR and people professionals and the businesses they support. HR Voices is brought to you by the expert team at HR Independence Limited. We hope you enjoy.
Hello, welcome to today's edition of HR Voices podcast. I am Mary Asante, and with me here is my co-host, Charlotte Allfrey. Today, we are going to be looking at the previous 4 episodes of a podcast that we've done on flexible working. And we are going to give our key takeaways from those episodes and then discussing also sort of from HR perspective as well, the implications, the impact on organizations and on employees, as well as some of the benefits to both organizations and employees in implementing flexible working, and also how HR and people professionals can support both organizations and employees in implementing successful flexible working arrangements and strategies. So, Charlotte, it's just you and me today.
It is, yeah, just us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going to be talking about all the episodes, and then we'll work through it. What was the most interesting aspect of all the flexible working arrangement discussions to you?
So I think one of the things that surprised me the most, I suppose, was when I have spoken to clients around the idea of perhaps doing a 4-day working week. It's actually been on the basis that you would cut the salary to 80%, and then cut all the other benefits and all the things that go with it to 80%. Whereas actually the conversation that we had with Chris was very much around 100% pay for 80% work. Yeah. And that I was surprised at that because I'd not come across that before. So I found that quite surprising. And actually I thought, well, that was really a really good way of engaging the organisation to sort of take that trial and do that. And it was an absolute win-win for everybody, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from what Chris discussed on his episodes that we had with him, it was an absolute success, both from an employer's point of view and from the employee's point of view. So it goes to show that with all these, you can be innovative if you know your organizations and the employees and you know what will work for them and what wouldn't work for them, etc. And actually, a 4-day working week doesn't have to mean your full hours compressed over 4 days, but it can be a genuine 20% cut of working hours for employees. And that's, I think Chris did say, that's when they saw the real value in it.
Well, they did. And I suppose, really, if you think about the compressed working week, actually, it kind of goes against the grain of the purpose of flexible working, because you might get that extra day off in a week, but actually what you've done is work 4 really long days, which can be really hard. And also, if you do have caring responsibilities, whether that's the child end or the sort of the aging parent end of the spectrum, actually, it's very hard to make care arrangements within a long working day, because you're spreading those hours that you're losing on the 5th day into the other day. So it can make it really hard. So I thought that was a bit of a game changer. I really did. Yeah.
Totally agree. And for me, it was the whole interesting angle, I think, from all guest speakers about the fact that the pandemic brought forward something that flexible working isn't a new concept. No. It's been around, it's been talked about, the policies around it, etc., has been there for a long time. And the default answer to almost all flexible working requests, regardless of what the reason for the request was, 90% of the time, no, we can't accommodate this because However, with the pandemic and almost all organizations being forced into some sort of remote type working, suddenly it can be accommodated in most roles and in most jobs.
Well, yeah, and there's evidence, employers and employees have got evidence now, there's data to back it up. So employees can say, well, this should be approved because I have demonstrated over the last 3 years that I have successfully done my job role in this way. And if you think about what we know about Emma and the number of years that she has been tirelessly campaigning for flexible working and developments in the world of flexible working, I think, for her, this is a huge leap forward, a great step forward in policy, process, and, legislation to back it up, actually, because as we know, we've got some changes pending now, which potentially have been fueled off the back of the pandemic as well. So I think for her, this must be, really a really good time. And she must be so pleased to see the developments have been made, because she's been banging this drum for a long time.
Absolutely. And yes, I do agree. And I think for all proponents and campaigners of flexible working, they will be breathing a big sigh of relief, because not only is it suddenly possible, but also it's been proven that it can work, and it does work, and productivity doesn't necessarily go down because people are working flexibly, irrespective of what type of flexible working arrangements that's being implemented, or that people will slack off just because they are working flexibly, which has been one of the key concerns for most employers, most managers, when it comes to flexible working arrangements. And I think Kevin made a really good point about the fact that actually for flexible working arrangements to work, it needs to go right back to the beginning of the employer-employee relationship. That is, when you are thinking about the job, when you are formulating that job description, that job specification, we can make it obvious, or you can make it obvious through your job specification, through the job ads, that this job accommodates flexible working arrangements, and it makes it easier. And I think Emma also did say that they are finding more and more that more candidates are open to talking about flexible working right from the beginning of their journey. When they are applying for those roles, they are more open to asking whether the role accommodates or allows for flexible working or not.
Well, they are. But then I think you and I have discussed that actually now what you're seeing in job adverts and listings are very clear definitions. So there are companies out there that are putting adverts out there, and they have got on them that it's an on-site role. And so therefore they're saying, we're not prepared to discuss flexible working, you need to be on site. Whereas actually we're also now seeing a lot of adverts where companies are saying, we welcome applicants from people who want to work in a hybrid way or in a flexible way or want to adapt their hours. So actually, it's taking a lot of the secrecy and the when's the right time to drop that bomb bit of the conversation in the recruitment process. Because what are you going to do? You go through the recruitment process, you get an offer, and then in comes that email or that letter that says, oh, by the way, I'd really quite like to work flexibly. And suddenly it's a big surprise. So actually, I think if we can take the surprise element out of the conversations, and that's what some of the government legislation changes are going to do as well, which is really good. Actually, let's start from that base point when we first have that interaction in the recruitment process, and let's have those conversations right from the word go, because then we're all on the same page. We all know what we're trying to achieve, and we all know how we're going to get there.
Absolutely. And it does open the talent pool up as well, isn't it? It's not...
Yeah.
Doesn't limit roles or job opportunities to people who can only work full-time, who can only commute to offices, or who cannot be present sort of 5 days a week, etc., physically in an office space. So it opens up the job pool to how many people can apply for those jobs and how many people can actually are available to do the job as well. let's not forget that it also opens up opportunities for intergenerational working within the workspace.
Yeah. Yeah, very important.
So
it is. And I think, one of the things we didn't actually touch on with any of our guests really was not just necessarily working hybridly or working from home, but working overseas, where people can work from. So you're right in that it opens up the talent pools, because not only does it open it up to a wider market in the locality that the business is in, but actually, if you are prepared to work in a hybrid or a remote way, it opens your talent pool up to national and even global possibilities, because you could have candidates working anywhere, and then you really can pick the best candidates for the role.
Yeah. And the world in its truest sense is becoming a real or a true global village, in that you can be anywhere and work for any company located or headquartered anywhere else in the world, with the use of technology and with the advancement of technology as well, of course.
Yes, of course. But then I know you, as our data protection expert on the team, that, obviously we want to make sure that the right systems and security processes are in place to allow that to happen. But it is absolutely possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of some of the challenges, though, let's get the difficult conversations out of the way, then we can look at some of the niceties. Because I think with someone listening, then they'll go, here we go again, HR, and yes, everything flowery, everything is nice and good and whatever, and why should I do this? But let's take a balanced view to this discussion that we are having today. So we'll look at some of the benefits as well as some of the challenges that flexible working poses for organizations as well as for employees. So what do you think, sort of your take on what some of the challenges of implementing flexible working in the workplace is?
Well, in this little mini series that I have on every podcast, tried to be the voice of the companies that don't want to put flexible working in place, because
office, your desk is
because there are some out there. There are some out there, and there are some out there that can't do it because they don't feel the jobs can be done in that way. That can be a very real thing. Not all jobs can be adapted. We know that. And there are some that don't want to do it because they just don't feel comfortable with it. And there is definitely a productivity paranoia with some, organisation sort of leadership teams. And that might be based off of bad experiences they've had, so that they haven't had a lived experience with an employee and it's not sat well, and that's how they view it moving forward. But, it's difficult. You really do have to switch the mindset and the thinking from hours worked at the desk to productivity, tasks, deliverables, objectives, and progress. And that can be a very difficult mindset shift for some organizations. And one of the things I think everybody has said is it absolutely goes back to culture, the culture of the organization and the beliefs and the values of the leadership teams. So for some organizations, if leadership aren't committed, then the staff aren't going to be committed, because it's not going to be implemented in the right way, and it's not going to be sold and communicated and put in place, implicated in the right way. So I think we really do have to consider whether it is right for the organisation. So I think a really good long hard look at whether job, as you say, going right back to job descriptions, can jobs be adapted? And if they can, great. And if they can't, why can't they? Because you need to be able to explain that to employees and teams that perhaps put the requests in. And you might have to recruit accordingly for that. So there will be organisations where it's not all, as you say, flowers and fluffy HR stuff, where we say, oh, yes, everything can be done flexibly. Some things can't. So I think you have to be very realistic about what you can do in your own organisation, and know what the jobs that your people do actually do, really know what they do, not just, guess. You really need to understand the roles.
Yes, I agree. I think a lot to unpack there. And did make a really good point about every job is different.
Yeah.
Every organization is different. So flexible working is not a matter of one size fits all for all organizations or even within organizations for all jobs, but a good look at each and every job, what is required of that job role and the outcome of the role will give you a very good indication of, yes, this role can be done flexibly and we can accommodate when those requests come in and we can do the right thing. And I think the leadership mindset thing is a big part of successful implementation of flexible working, in as much as sometimes we're all comfortable with what we know.
Yeah.
About the culture is the way we do things here, isn't it? This is how we've always done things here. And yes, the pandemic changed something, but actually, I didn't actually like it.
Yeah, so let's change back. Let's go back to the way we were.
To how it was. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
it's really looking at it from the point of view of, okay, let's be pragmatic about this whole thing. Yes, we weren't prepared ever to grant anyone any flexible working, but for 2.5 years, we had to face reality that we had no option but to give people the opportunity, or not the opportunity, that it wasn't optional, it was mandatory, it was do that, or sometimes your business stopped operating altogether. So it was actually it wasn't a matter of choice for most organizations. If you wanted to keep your operation going during the pandemic, you had to find a way of making your employees work remotely or flexibly, unless you were a key or considered as a key organization delivering critical services or essential services. So basically, when it was an absolute necessity, it worked, why then can't it work now?
Well, I mean, that's a very big question, Mary. It's a very big question because actually it goes wider than just employees. I mean, if you take the whole sort of public sector debate and whether, people that are working in organisations that are funded by public funds should be working from home or should be back in their locations providing services when so many services are, in backlog, I think that's probably a conversation for a different day. But I think, as we said, what's coming out of this whole mini-series is that there are far more reasons to try flexible working. There are far more positive reasons to try flexible working. And there seems to be good data to back that up. And actually, what people like Emma, Chris and Steve and Kevin are all saying is trust the data. Why wouldn't you try it? You might like it. That said, in organisations where it's not necessarily possible, it doesn't mean that you can't enter into it at all. You can have an organisation that has several different working arrangements. And I think that was what was quite interesting about Steve talking about his knowledge and his views of the sort of the whole Amazon model, because that was saying actually for a big organisation like Amazon, they have the capacity and the availability and the workload 24/7. So actually they have a lot more ability to flex and to provide lots and lots of different working arrangements. That's not possible for all companies, and it's certainly not possible for some of the smaller companies, the SMEs out there. But I think it is looking at what you can do and thinking about how you could implement even the smallest flexible working tweak or change to try and see what works. But of course, something that they've all spoken about is communication with your people, your staff, your employees, your stakeholders, your customers. How do people use your services? How do employees deliver the services? What would work and what wouldn't? And so with Chris, what was quite interesting was, yes, okay, he went down to a 4-day working week for his staff, but the business is still operational 5 days and it's done with a rota.
Yeah.
So, whoever has the Monday off or whoever's going to work the Friday has the preceding Monday off. So they still get a long weekend. So it's really around being really imaginative and innovative on how you can try and put some of that in place, isn't it?
Absolutely. And communication is key because, again, it's easy to assume that all your workforce, all your employees want flexible working. Again, statistics and some surveys show that not everyone wants to work either flexibly or remotely or the various arrangements that come with it. So it's important to, again, look at it from that lens or from that angle as well, that it's not everybody who wants to work flexibly. So again, communicating, engaging, and making the workforce part of the whole process can highlight some of these issues, because there are some people who would go, hey, I'm quite happy coming into the office 5 days a week. And there are others who kind of go, actually, I'll be happy with 2 days in the office, 3 days at home or whatever. So listening to your employees, listening to their views of what might work, what might not work is very important. And this is probably where we can pause and sort of look at things from HR point of view, some of the practical challenges that might come with having different arrangements, like Steve touched on in the Amazon scenario, into place. So like having a workforce with people working part-time, term time only, 4-day working week, flexi hours, and all those sort of things. What are some of the HR challenges that may come, or even managers' nightmares, or business owners' challenges that may come with some of these things?
Well, you know the first big one, don't you? It's calculating holiday pay. I mean, goodness me, that can be an art in itself, particularly when you've got casual workers or zero-hour contract workers, and with the Harper and Brazil ruling, and whether that's in, out, or shaking it all about, who knows? So I think calculating holiday, calculating access to appropriate benefits, calculating whether people are entitled to all the bank holidays or not, and whether that gets added to holiday allowances. So those are just some really basic, simple things. How you calculate pay, whether it's spread out over equal monthly payments, or whether it's, work for hours worked, which means that somebody working term time working might not get any pay during the 6 weeks of the summer holidays. So it really is trying to find ways that suit individuals, because actually, if you get it wrong, you can put employees into significant hardship in terms of how their salaries are organised. I'm just trying to think what else. I mean, of course, covering workload is a big issue. As we said, organisations have really got to look at how their organisation delivers their services to their customers, to their whatever it is they buy, sell, make or do. They need to make sure that they can buy, sell, make or do that all the time and in line with what they promise their customers, because otherwise, if you lose customers, there's no business, there's no money coming into the business. So it's got to work from two very different angles. So they've got to make sure they can cover their services. They've got to make sure that appropriate performance management reviews and one-to-ones and, team meetings, and how do they keep people engaged? That's something that's really difficult in remote teams, and particularly in split teams where some are in the office and some aren't, and some are working in a hybrid way. You have to, as a line manager, there's a real skills gap there to ensure that line managers know how to get the best out of a remote or a hybrid team, because otherwise it's not going to work, is it?
Yeah. And that there is also the issue, almost certainly, of fairness. Because flexible work in each and every request really has to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. And then the perceived fairness from other employees when they put in their request and it's turned down compared to someone's request that was granted on its merit can also be an issue, I think.
Yeah, that's been an issue for a while, hasn't it? Actually, even before the pandemic, you would get, individuals that would put a request in and it would be approved because you can put them through on a first come, first served basis. And because there was this mindset not to, where possible, not to approve flexible working, companies might only sort of let 1 or 2 requests through, and then everything else after that would be a definite no. So yeah, fairness is a really big thing. But again, if you have consulted with your employees and worked out what everybody perhaps would ideally want, I mean, we can't, my voice of the employer that doesn't like this very much is saying, yes, but this is my business and I want to run it my way, and I want my staff to turn up and I want them to do this job in the way that I want them to do it. Why do I have to consult with everybody? I can't please everybody. So you can hear that side of it as well, and you can understand the concern and the frustration. But as I say, what we've heard in the last few weeks is, check the data, listen to the findings, listen to what the data's telling you, look at the benefits, look at the positives. Yes, it takes a bit of work to get how you want it. And yes, you've got to review it and you might have to adapt a few things, but actually it works.
Yeah. Yes, and on that note, Kevin did touch on the fact that we shouldn't forget that employers are under no legal obligation to grant these requests.
No.
They have an obligation to give serious consideration to the request and to give fair reasons for turning down the request, but there's no obligation on them to grant these requests. So we must not forget that. However, if you look at the employer-employee relationship, it's not all about legal compliance, etc., etc. There's a lot of goodwill. There's a lot of psychological contract, and so that there is the element of sort of an almost give and take sometimes in the relationship, where it builds trust and confidence between both parties when it comes to sort of all employee relationship, but also flexible working relationship as well. And in terms of that brings into, yes, what my contract says, what the contract says, and the past 2 or so years I've been working from home. And now the call from some employers to, I want them back in the office. I want my employee in the office, and I want them in the office because that's what's in their contract. Where do we go with that or from that?
Well, you tear the rule book up and start again, don't you? You get new contracts in place. I mean, that's the obvious response. But yes, I mean, I've been talking to clients about that very same thing. We've managed for the last 2.5 years, but that's not how we roll, and that's not how we do things around here. And I want to get people back in the office. And actually, if you think about some of the things that people in other conversations we've had, not necessarily just in the mini-series, but actually what people have said is that the things that they feel that are missing from the remote teams and the hybrid working are, communication, collaboration, innovation, and connectivity. And I think something that Kevin touched on as well is you have to make the best use of the time when you have the people in the office, because if you have everybody back 2 days a week, or half of them back 2 days a week, and actually what they do is spend all day on a Teams call or a Zoom call with everybody else who's not in the office, what's the point of that? They might just as well be sitting in their home office without having done the commute. So it really is about, actually, if you are really committed and determined to bringing everybody back for specific days, really look at the reason why and what it is you're looking to gain out of that. And if you are one of those businesses that is saying, I want everybody back in and I want them back in straight away, because, really look at the because and see why, for what purpose, and what do you think you're going to gain over and above what you've had in the last couple of years. I mean, the other thing we've talked about, is apprenticeships, haven't we? We've talked about how, people learn from others. They learn from listening what's going on around them. They learn from seeing how other people interact with each other, from sitting in meetings and hearing information, given over from staff to clients or clients to staff. And so, there's a real learning culture in being in person. And I suppose, a lot of people refer to it as we've lost the water cooler chats. But actually, I've heard feedback where people have said, I get far more done working remotely because I don't get collared every time I walk down to the coffee machine or to the kitchen. And I'm not, chatting and jibber jabbing on about, everything I did at the weekend. I'm at home, head down, getting on with my job and delivering what I need to deliver.
Absolutely. And I think on that note, we can go on this particular topic. One, because it's a hot topic, it's very relevant, it's very current to most individuals, to most organizations. And I think let's take the opportunity to look at some of the benefits to both employers and employees of implementing flexible working.
Yeah. See, now my employers in my head that don't want to embrace it, I think their view would be actually the benefits are mainly for the individual, not for the business. So persuade me, Mary. Persuade me why. Persuade me what some of these benefits are.
I do think for employers, though, some of the benefits for flexible working is really productivity. Statistics and the data, as you keep saying, refer to the data is starting to show that people can be more productive when they work flexibly, whether it's remotely, whether it's hybrid working, whether it's flexi hours and all those sort of things. People can be a bit more productive. And the reason why is that people become a lot more focused on what they are doing. There's a lot less distraction when people are working flexibly, especially when they're working remotely compared to when they are working in offices. And actually, if you are going into the office with purpose, as in going for meetings in huddles, etc., collaboration, etc., again, you are even going in with a purpose in mind, and that focuses your mind on what you need to do and how you need to do it. And I think also the data or statistics is starting to show that people are less likely to go on sick leaves. They're less likely to take time out for their personal appointments. They're less likely. So absenteeism and stuff in the workplace goes down when people have the ability to work flexibly. And we know the cost of absenteeism, regardless of what the reason is to organizations, is huge, and it can be huge throughout the year. So there is some real benefit there if you can afford your employees to work, or your workforce to work flexibly. It invariably reduces some of that. And also sickness absence goes down as well, because if the individual is a lot more happier, they have a better work-life balance, in most cases, sickness absence goes down. The level of stress, anxiety, and all those sort of things go down as well. So there are real benefits, not perceived benefits, in my view, to employers in implementing flexible working. And again, the list goes on, but there are genuine benefits. And what is one of the favorite all-time HR saying? A happy worker is a productive worker, right?
It's absolutely right. That's what we say. Yeah. If your staff are happy, then they'll look after your business, and they'll look after you and your clients and your customers, and do great stuff. So it's something we say, and I think as we touched on earlier, it opens up the talent pool. It shows that you can seek talent from many different groups and from many different areas, which can be invaluable. It really can be. Particularly if you're, in an organisation based in in a big city, where actually salaries are high, and there is, big competition for roles. We've talked for a long time about how it's now a candidate market, not a job employer sort of searching market. It is absolutely a candidate's market. But, there are so many jobs out there and so much competition for roles that actually, if you can open up the pool much wider and further away, then actually you will probably get some really good candidates.
Absolutely. And of course, there are benefits to the employee. They
Yes.
invariably get a better work-life balance. And yes, I think some of our guests, I recall Kevin touching on it and Steve potentially as well, talked about the impact of flexible working on the mental health of individuals. Some of them were positive impact, and for some individuals, there were negative impact on their mental health. So for individuals as well, there are benefits to it. And again, it goes back to this knowing your team, knowing your employees. And for those people who feel isolated, working remotely, etc., maybe you create opportunities for them to work within a space with others around them. And for other people who may find it a bit overwhelming, with so many people around them all the time, you give them opportunities to work remotely as well, or in sort of different spaces that also work for them. So again, finding the right balance, what works for you, what works for your organization, what works for your employees is definitely key to successful implementation of flexible working. So
it is, but it's not an off-the-shelf product, is it? It really is bespoke. It's really got to be honed and fine-tuned. And I think that's what everybody has said. It really has got to be made to work.
Absolutely. How can we round up this conversation with how HR and people professionals can support organizations and employees in the successful implementation of flexible working that is tailored to work for them and the organizations?
Yeah, so I think if you have an organisation that perhaps wants to try something across the board, so they want to take a flexible working approach, then I think there's lots we can do to help them. Things like instigating pulse point surveys or staff surveys to everybody to try and find out what it is that people are looking for. And I think we've seen in the HR world over recent years that actually flexible working and flexibility in their role has become potentially more valuable than increases in salary and extra perks and benefits. So it's clearly something that's valued. So I think we can try and embrace that and find out what staff are looking for and see whether that can even be achieved. I think we can support organisations to work through job descriptions and person specifications to try and see how roles may or may not be able to be adapted, so to help them come up with a strategy of how to plan, whether they want to implement flexible working, and if so, how, because it could be done in a staged way. It could be done in a very planned and methodical way to try and get the process in place and get everybody where they want them to be, and to review it and check it's working, because you have to make sure it's working well. I think we can, what else can we do? I think we can help line managers and leadership teams. We can coach and mentor them to have those positive conversations around flexible working, rather than just, the blanket no approach. We're not going to entertain that request. We can inform on the new legislation, make sure everybody understands the changes that are coming up, because there are some changes. We don't know when. We know what they will roughly be, which is, again, going back to this idea of it becoming a day one right, not something that you have to have after 26 weeks. So we can make sure that everybody understands new legislation, and we can support line managers to help put arrangements in place and to review them, and if they're not working, to change them.
Absolutely. And the one key thing there is also the culture and the impact that HR people professionals can have in fostering the right culture in the organization that enables and empowers both employees and the employer or line managers to create an environment where people feel able to discuss, to request for flexible working, to discuss what works, what isn't working, and to support them to look at existing policies if it's not right for where the organization is right now. Just because that's what the policy says doesn't mean it needs to stay like that. You need to look at what is changing within the organization. And also it can be a very powerful retention tool. It's right in a market where it's hard to find candidates anyway. When you found the right candidates, it's good to support them, to nurture them, and to make accommodation to meet their needs, because it's only through that they can also support your organization and what the organization need from them. And overall, they will help you to achieve your goals. And leadership, the mindset, the training, etc., presenteeism, leaders overcoming that concept that, like you said at the beginning of this conversation, Charlotte, changing the way we measure success or productivity from how many hours I'm sat at my desk to the output at the end of it all, compared to me just being there type.
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, the one thing, you and I have both done the whole working thing with trying to bring up small people. And, the one thing that we've often said is it is absolutely a juggle and a hustle. And anything out there that can help to let people like us have a career, do what we want to do, still grow and develop in our own way in terms of self-development and career development, but just manage that juggle and hustle a little bit better, is great. And I'm all for that.
Excellent. Right. Thank you very much, Charlotte, for your time this evening. And thank you, everyone, for listening to this podcast. Would love to hear from you. If there's anything that you'd like us to discuss going forward, please get in touch with us. Or if you'd like to come on as a guest, or you have someone you'd like to recommend to come on as a guest, again, we'd love to hear from you. But happy listening, and let us know how you found the podcast. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of HR Voices. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover or would like to be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media or email us at hrvoices@hrindependence.co.uk. Tune in next time.